Hello and welcome to HW News. This is Miyati. Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday, while addressing the entire nation, has talked about the lockdown 2.0. He said that the lockdown has been extended till May 3rd, that is 20 more days of lockdown in India. Now, apparently, Prime Minister Modi and the Ministry of Home Affairs had, back when the first lockdown, the first phase of lockdown was imposed in the country, had released a document, and in that particular document they had explained the kind of activities that will be allowed to carry out and the kind of activities that will not be allowed to carry out during the period of lockdown. Now, since the lockdown has been extended, this is the first day of lockdown 2.0, and the Ministry of Home Affairs today has issued another set of document in which they have enlisted the activities that are permitted in this duration and the activities that are not allowed. But certainly one has to say that there are some relaxations that can be seen in this particular document and the guidelines that has been issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Today I'm going to talk about the same, and I'm going to list out for you what are the things that are prohibited, what are the things that are allowed, and what are the exceptions that the government has given. So let us begin with the what exactly is prohibited during this lockdown period. All domestic and international air travel for passengers will be prohibited. All passenger movements by trains except for security purpose will also be prohibited. Buses for public transport, metro rail services, inter-district and interstate movement of individuals except for medical reasons or for activities permitted under these guidelines. All educational, training, coaching institutions will remain closed. All industrial and commercial activities other than those specifically permitted under these guidelines, hospitality services other than those specifically permitted under these guidelines, taxis, auto rickshaws, cycle rickshaws and services of cab aggregators, all cinema halls, malls, shopping complexes, gymnasiums, sports complexes, swimming pool, entertainment parks, theatre, bars and auditoriums, assembly halls and similar places. All social, political, sports, entertainment, academic, cultural, religious functions and other gatherings, all religious places, places of worship to remain closed for the public. Religious congregation are strictly prohibited. In case of funerals, congregation of more than 20 people will not be permitted. So as per the guideline, as you heard, things that are prohibited include the movement of people through, you can say, the railways, through air travel. That has been completely prohibited, and the congregation of people has been permitted. Maybe it may be for religious purpose or be it for any other purpose. The congregation of people has completely been barred under the new guidelines. Now let us move on to the hotspot. What are the guidelines for the hotspot? Now, there is no relief given in this particular set of guidelines for the hotspot, coronavirus hotspots that have been identified across the country. Hotspots are the areas where COVID-19 outbreak is very severe, and there are many such areas identified in the country by the central government. For them, there are containment zones where the area is completely sealed and there are no relief given to these hotspots. As Prime Minister Modi said that there will be some kind of a monitoring, there will be some kind of an observation at district administration and the state level, and after observing, after monitoring, if the administration is satisfied that the area is following a lockdown, if people in the particular area are following the lockdown, if they are adhering to the guidelines issued by the government, then post 20th of April, there could be some relaxation for those areas. However, as of now, for the hotspot, except for the essential services of groceries and medical services, there is no such relief given to the hotspot area. The inward and outward movement is completely prohibited. The areas have been sealed and nobody is allowed to go out, nobody is allowed to come inside those particular areas. Well, the guidelines also talk about the things that are allowed during the period of the lockdown. However, it has been bifurcated sector-wise. Under every sector, there is a list of things which are allowed. There are a list of activities which are allowed to carry out during the period of the lockdown, and there is a list of things that are not allowed to carry out. So we will go sector-wise. First, we will talk about the health sector. In health sector, the public utilities are allowed to carry out without any hindrance. Social sector will remain functional. All the shops of chemists, shops of pharmacists, then veterinary hospitals, those will remain functional. Thereafter, the manufacturing units of drugs, manufacturing units of medical equipments, and the construction of medical infrastructure will be allowed in these 20 days period of the lockdown. There will be no prohibition on these activities to be carried out under the health sector. Let's move on to next important sector, that is the agriculture sector. Now, agriculture sector is particularly facing a lot of problem due to lockdown. The Rabi season is coming up. Now, the farmers will start sowing seeds and preparing their fields for sowing the seeds as well. So, in these lockdowns, lots of farmers are not getting the laborers to work in their fields, and it has been pretty tough for farmers as well. Lots of crop has already been destroyed, and farmers are especially worried about the Rabi season that is coming. So the central government has provided a certain guideline for the agriculture sector as well. Let us see what they are saying. Farming operations including procurement of agricultural products, agricultural marketing through notified mandis and direct and decentralized marketing, manufacture, distribution and retail of fertilizers, pesticides and seeds will be allowed. Activities of marine and inland fisheries will be allowed. So the fishermen, they will be allowed to carry out their businesses. They will be allowed to go into the seas. Animal husbandry activities including the supply chain of milk, milk products, poultry and livestock farming, tea, coffee and rubber plantation are allowed to be functional in this duration. Industries operating in rural areas including the food processing industries, those will be allowed to function in the period of the lockdown. Construction of roads, irrigation projects, building and industrial projects in rural areas, works under MNREGA with priority to irrigation and water conservation works, again because of the farming activity that is going to start in the Rabi season, and operation of rural common service centers has been allowed under the lockdown. Now let's move on to the financial sector. The important components of the financial sector, that is RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, banks, ATMs, capital and debt markets as notified by the SEBI, and insurance companies will also remain functional in the period. SEBI and capital and debt market services as notified by the Securities and Exchange Board of India, IRDAI and insurance companies that will remain functional in the lockdown period. Now let's move on to the social sector. Operation of homes for children, mentally disabled, senior citizens and destitutes will be allowed. Operation of Anganwadis, observation homes, disbursement of social security measures. MNREGA works are allowed with strict implementation of social distancing and face masks. So, if you are working under MNREGA, then social distancing has to be followed and a face mask is compulsory. Let's move on to public utilities. Petrol pumps, LPG, petroleum and gas retail and storage outlets are allowed. Now let me tell you that in some parts of the country, petrol was not allowed until you wear a mask. So the petrol pumps, LPG, petroleum and gas retail and storage outlets have been allowed to function. Generation, transmission and distribution of power at central and state union territory levels, that has been allowed. Postal services including the post offices, operations at municipal local body levels, and telecommunication and internet has been allowed. Let's move on to transport and goods. Transportation of goods will be permitted without any distinction of essential or non-essential services. Now it is important to note here that earlier in the phase 1 of the lockdown, only essential supply of goods was permitted. However, this time around, the supply of essential and non-essential both goods will be permitted without any distinction. Operations of railways, airports, seaports or transport for goods and cargo movement. So, the railways, airports, seaports and transport will not be functional for the passengers but only for the goods and cargo movement. Operation of land ports for transport of essential services. Movement of all trucks with 2 drivers and 1 helper is allowed under the lockdown. Then let's move on to essential services. All facilities in supply chain of essential goods will be allowed. Shops including the ration shops under the public distribution system, dealing with food, groceries, fruits, vegetables, dairy and milk booths, meat and fish, animal fodder, fertilizers, seeds and pesticides. No restriction will be on timing, so they can function 24/7 as per their choice. However, district authorities may encourage and facilitate home delivery to minimize the movement of individuals outside their homes. Print and electronic media also is allowed. It has been listed under the essential services. E-commerce operations, courier services are allowed. Cold storage and warehousing services will be allowed as well. Data and call centers for government activities only, specifically for government activities it will be allowed. Hotel, homestays, lodges and motels which are accommodating only the tourists and persons stranded due to lockdown, medical and emergency staff, air and sea crew, that will be allowed to function. Services provided by self-employed persons like electrician, plumbers, repairmen, carpenters and motor mechanics, that will be allowed. Let's move on to next, industries. In addition to the manufacturing of essential goods and rural industries, establishment engaged in production of coal, mine, mineral, packaging material, jute and brick kilns, that will be allowed. Manufacturing and other industrial establishment with access control will be allowed in special economic zones, economic units, industrial estates and industrial township after implementation of standard operating procedure for social distancing. So the special economic zones and industrial estates, industrial townships will be allowed to function, but social distancing has to be maintained. There should be a standard operating procedure for the social distancing in these areas. Manufacture of IT hardware and essential goods and packaging can resume during the lockdown. Now, there is a relief for construction workers as well. So, construction of roads, irrigation projects, building and all kinds of industrial projects will be allowed, and construction of renewable energy products will be allowed. Now, much of the migrant laborers and the daily wage laborers work in the construction sector. So, for them, it's a relief. Now let's move on to some other areas which will be functional during the lockdown 2.0. The defense sector will be functional, central armed police forces, they will be functional, health and family welfare, disaster management and early warning agencies, they will all be functioning. They were functioning in the first phase of lockdown as well, and now they will be functioning for the rest of the lockdown period too. Police, Home Guard, Civil Defense, Fire and Emergency Services and all other Department of State and Union Territories to work with restricted staff. So, these services will go on, however, there should be a restricted staff. Now, let's also look at the cases in which the movement of persons is allowed. Only in the emergency cases, whereas the private vehicles will be allowed. In medical care or if there is a veterinary emergency, in such cases the movement of persons will be allowed. However, if you are traveling through four-wheeler, then apart from the driver, only one person is allowed to sit in the backside, and if you are traveling from through a two-wheeler, then only the person who is driving the two-wheeler is allowed to go out. However, those persons who are going to work and coming back, they are also exempted from the lockdown. So, these are the guidelines that has been announced along with the lockdown 2.0. For, as I said, for the next few days till 20th of April, there will be a monitoring, and after that, after monitoring, it will be decided in which areas the lockdown should be eased out and in which areas the lockdown should be strictly imposed once again. Do let us know what you think in the comment box below. For more news and updates, you can log on to www.hwnews.in.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.